Hey, okay, so this is the professional creative development part two section, but dealing specifically with graduate school. And as I explained in the last section, if you just skipped over it because it's kind of long, I divided these sections into two because I feel as though there is a different sort of training happening in my graduate school education than there is in my what I call the personal creative uni part of my education, which takes place outside of graduate school. And just to focus on graduate school, because this is what the segment is about, specifically in grad school, things tend to be a bit more regimented and rigid, and I wouldn't say set in stone, but definitely sort of sitting on the backbone of an institution that is relatively inflexible and unbreakable called the Ivory Tower. And dealing with the Ivory Tower and dealing with bureaucracy really in general can put a very different spin on one's education, on the outcomes of that education, and on the expectations that are put on you as a student, as someone who is the recipient of this education. And honestly, the difference between the graduate school education and when I educate myself, because I'm a major autodidact, those differences are quite stark. And so I just wanted to separate those just to show you sort of what I'm learning, how I'm learning it in the graduate school context. And just to start, for one, the graduate school part of my training, again, tends to be not only a little bit more rigid and more regimented, but it tends to be more focused. So in my personal creative uni, I can basically complete my own individual personalized tracks. If I wanted to do a directing filmmaking track, I just look for courses online, purchase them, or free courses, and I bundle them all together in, one directing track. I take all of them, I learn a lot of stuff, and it's great. With graduate school, and I could do that with other different tracks as well, screenwriting, book selling, film distribution, whatever I wanted to study. In graduate school, on the other hand, there is one track, and that one track is to get a theater arts MFA in the very specific field of dramaturgy. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. Fine. So there are three parts to our very focused graduate school track. One is like the foundational core, which gives us a larger, wider knowledge of the theater field, both from a historical perspective, a cultural perspective, and a scholarly/academic perspective, basically preparing us to advance the field of studies within theater, but from within the academic university setting, which I have little to zero interest in personally. And so that foundational core tended to frustrate me because I felt as though from time to time, scholarship was being shoved down my throat, whereas I came to the MFA program to become an artist. So that really frustrated me and kind of pushed me to my edge. And unfortunately, it was for that same exact reason that pretty much half of our cohort unfortunately left the program, which was unfortunate in many ways because that half I was super close to because we were all like on the same page, vibing out as artists, wanting to be artists, wanting to just do our art. And that was unfortunate. But then the other part was that this is the inaugural year of the program. And so that definitely posed a lot of institutional challenges and institutional doubts that, and giving credit where credit is due, that our faculty and our administrators are dealing with wonderfully. Just if you guys know anything about the inner workings of how putting courses together work for academia, how significant class sizes are to even having a whole separate course for a program in academia, like all of those things are major concerns, especially for an inaugural program. And so when we lost half of our class because the MFA felt more like an MA program, that posed a lot of social, personal challenges and emotional challenges for me, but also some institutional and administrative challenges for our faculty and staff, which I think we're all doing really well in dealing with those challenges. But that's just how it is. All these things are things I do not have to deal with when I educate myself outside of the educational walls of a university ivory tower system. So this is just letting you know from jump that if you're in a graduate school program, whether it's just beginning or well established, I still feel in my gut that it's super important to continue to supplement your education with classes, courses, knowledge, books, podcasts, blogs, whatever that exist outside of the program. You have more freedom, you have more flexibility, and courses that you take outside of your grad program are actually going to teach you how to be a business person in real life, not just in the university system. It'll actually teach you how to monetize your talents and your brand. It'll teach you how to make money, essentially, and it will teach you other craft skills from different perspectives. And those classes also tend to be more up to speed with what's actually happening in a particular industry. Whereas in graduate school, a lot of our scholarly work and artistic work sometimes is behind the curve because basically our educators are often just educators. And I say that not in a derogatory way, because I do believe educators are literally the most important people on the planet. However, because their entire career revolve around teaching, a lot of times they're unable to participate fully in the professional aspects of an industry. So it's very hard, for example, for a teacher who's teaching film directing to students 2 semesters in a year to continue to stay relevant in the field of film directing on a professional level, unless he is consistently like making his own films every single summer, and hitting those sort of bars of success wherein, he's visible and still relevant in the industry. Now, of course, one's success is very dependent on one's own definition of success. You don't have to be making the next Avengers to be able to be a good film director or to teach good film directing. Let's not get crazy. But if all a teacher is doing semester after semester after semester is teaching directing, but he's not actually in the field directing, sometimes what he's teaching can be a little bit behind the curve. Hold on a second. I heard some really weird ass noises. So if something happens, I have my phone and this is being recorded. Anyway, sorry about that. It's like you hear like weird things happening and then you don't see anything and you get weirded out. Anyway, but so you see what I mean? Like, and this is why a lot of some of the biggest film directors, like for example, let me actually like Quentin Tarantino. Like everybody wants to know what Quentin Tarantino has to say about film directing, but he's usually so damn busy directing because he's so relevant right now in our current media that he doesn't really have time to be a fully fledged professor, you know what I'm saying, at a university. So usually those classes from the people in the industry will come on a one-off basis. Like Scorsese and Ron Howard both, and also Werner Herzog, have classes that are evergreen and deal with their particular way of engaging with film directing. Those are available on masterclass.com. And they are wonderful classes, but they are not teaching those classes as part of their, tenure package at a university. It's a one-off 20 course class or 20 course signature course that anybody can access at any time. And occasionally they will pop in for office hours and things like that. Okay, that's basically how it will go. And that's essentially why it's very hard for me to stick specifically to graduate school and only to graduate school, because some of the most relevant material is out there in the world outside of the academy, coming from people who are actually working in the industry. So there's a difference between teaching 24/7 and doing 24/7. And I always strike that difference between those two things when I look at what I'm learning in grad school versus what I'm learning outside of graduate school. Anyway, that was a mini tangent, but just an FYI as to what kind of growth I've gone through mentally this year with regard to understanding how graduate school should function in my life. So we have that foundational core, very scholarly, very rooted in academia. Then we have the dramaturgical core, which I find really fascinating and really awesome. And it really helps us to get very hands-on and practical. That's basically what this year has been about for me personally. Lots of practica and practice and praxis, if you want to use all those words. Basically, our dramaturgical core dealt specifically with classical dramaturgy, like literally how to piece by piece put together a classical dramaturgical protocol, and how to engage with the analysis and the breakdown of a classical work. Very important foundationally, especially for what I want to do, and I'll get into that towards the end of this, but that's a core course that is necessary for me personally to develop my skills as a theater artist. The next two dramaturgical core classes we'll be taking, which I didn't take this semester, will deal specifically with new play dramaturgy and then experimental play dramaturgy. So we're getting a wonderful trifecta of courses and training on all levels of dramaturgy that I don't think is basically available anywhere else, honestly. That's great. So I love that. And then in the final year, I will be focusing specifically on my personal my personal specialty as a dramaturg. And I know for a fact that I'm going to be an adaptation dramaturg and a new play dramaturg specifically. I have no interest in working on producing old plays on the stage, really. But in order to be an adaptation dramaturg, you need to have classical dramaturgy skills. Because if you're going to adapt, let's say, a Shakespeare, which is what I plan on doing, into a modern day film, well, you need all of the classical dramaturgical skills to be able to understand how a Shakespeare play is functioning, how to break down a Shakespeare play, how to understand the language, the context, and the culture of a Shakespeare play, both inside the play and outside the play. So you need those classical skills, but then you also need the new play dramaturgical skills to take the classical work that you just did and translate it into a more modernized, fresher version of that classical work that you're adapting. And you also might need some experimental skills in there as well. So, what I learned this year as a graduate student basically is really helping me to train myself in a very particular, specific way as an adaptation dramaturg ultimately. I also do want to be in the new play dramaturgy section of my training. I do want to focus on developing artists and playwrights of color and voices of color, and I do want to be actively promoting new voices of color onto the American stage. I also, in my sort of the third part of what I've realized about myself this year as a dramaturg, because I am relatively okay in several languages, I also would like to participate in translation dramaturgy, taking works, again, particularly works from people of color in different countries, and not only translating them into English in the style and form in which they're meant to be translated, but also bringing those works after they've been translated onto the American stage. United States American theater is not very good at courting and importing foreign works, whereas overseas they do it all the time. So I really want to be someone who is helping to change and evolve the landscape in that way. as well as, of course, cultivating our own voices here at home that come from disenfranchised communities and underserved creative communities. So this year in graduate school has really taught me a lot about just dramaturgy and about who I am as a dramaturg, who I want to be as a dramaturg, and furthermore, it really has reinforced my skills as a director. And I feel as though if you're a director who also has not really been trained in dramaturgy, you're not going to be a bad director, but I do believe that you're missing out a little bit, because dramaturgy has taught me and has continued to teach me how to basically get inside of a work, how to understand the context of a work, both within itself and outside of itself. It's helped me to understand the voice of the particular artist that wrote that work. It's helping me to understand where to go to get other sources to do research on the work and to understand how the work has impacted the world in the past and how it might impact the current society now. It also just gives me like basic skills, like how to communicate or build bridges between what I'm doing as an artist and how the audience is receiving that work. Because a large part of dramaturgy is not just about cracking open the work and, basically creating a time capsule around the work. But it's also about educating your audience and giving them an opportunity to engage with your art and to learn something about your art. So doing things like creating lobby displays, creating pre-shows and doing pre-show presentations, hosting post-show talkbacks, being available to a production for interpretive, analyses and things like that really does contribute to how theater can be more involved in the community and how it can continue to evolve as a pedagogical medium for our communities and as a means of expression for our communities. Because I believe that communities should feel a sense of empowerment when it comes to theater. There should not be a top-down relationship when it comes to theater and the community it's serving. It should be an iterative, discursive relationship. So those are the larger broad strokes of what I've learned this year in graduate school and what I will be learning, but I want to get to the more specific points. It's funny because in the last video, I started out with the specific points and then I went to the larger, broader strokes, but I'm going to end with the specific points here. Specifically, I read or listened to 25 plays this year, which is insane. I was annoyed and mad at myself because I didn't finish my 50 book challenge. And actually I realized that I did. It's just that, I didn't finish all 50, but I thought I had read very little this year, but that actually wasn't the case. It's just that I was reading plays instead of books. So I read 25 plays, which were amazing. Not all of them were amazing, actually. Some of them pissed me off and some of them just were boring as hell. But I had a very diverse education in both classical and canonical works, as well as more modern day, diverse works. So that was a lovely, looking back on all those works, it was a lovely level of exposure to the play, to just theater. It was great. I also read a couple of academic books in total, including some of this book called Avid Editing, which I want to finish in 2018. I read The Shakespearean Dramaturg, which was an incredible resource, an incredible text. And then of course, we had a theoretical text called Theory, Theater, Theory. So, those were, despite the fact that I hate theory and I hate scholarship, the theory textbooks that we have been assigned are actually quite good in terms of really getting us inside of the soul of an era with regard to theater as it has evolved over time. So, the books are great. I just don't like studying them. I also completed 6 major grad courses, which included, Theater and Culture 1. And we actually read both history, theory, and plays in that course. I also did a race, gender, and representation in film course, which was like our race, gender, and class course. But like with film, we watched a lot of films, and that was great. I also finished, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, the Dramaturgy and the classic play course, where we learned all the ins and outs of how to classically break down, classically and dramaturgically break down a piece, a classical canonical piece. I also did the contemporary trends course, where we basically learned an entire new way of devising for theater. We didn't really learn much about the overarching trends, but we learned a lot about our professor's specific devising methodology, which is contemporary. So that really counted. I did enjoy that class after I stopped drowning in it. I also took the advanced playwriting new plays class, where I wrote a shitty first draft of a concept that's been on my slate for a long time that did not come out the way that I expected it to, but I did get some gems from it, so that was helpful. I also completed the editing fundamentals course, which I raved about in my last video. It was incredible, but I completed that as an independent study course, so I ended up editing 6 films for that class instead of 5 films for that class instead of the standard 4, as well as writing journal articles and doing readings and doing an editing analysis. So that class was very well rounded, and it was one of my favorite classes. And then, aside from those 6 those major courses, I also thankfully had the time to sit at least 2 stage plays or productions. I meant to do at least 2 more, but I just got caught up with work and crazy. I acted in / participated in 2 particular productions, both of which I enjoyed, but one of which I enjoyed a little bit more. I prefer to be in readings. I don't really like being on stage, having to memorize lines. That's like not me. And the reason why I had to do that for my CT class was because we just didn't have a company big enough where my role that I played could be cast. So it was an interesting experience. You know, I don't want to do it again unless I have to. I would prefer to, in that situation, be on the outside and actually directing. But I talked about that in my last podcast. So I dramaturged 2 stage productions, actually my first 2, and now I'm done. I dramaturged a small studio production this year called Creeps, which was an interesting experience. It was rough. It was a rough experience because I don't feel as though the director was used to working with a dramaturg or was really interested in working with a dramaturg and developing the piece. I feel like there was a lot of ego there, which, whatever. I guess I have a lot of ego too. But so that was tough, but I was able to get a lot of interesting experience out of that. And it was just great being in the black box when I was doing the post-show and talking to the actors and whatnot. And then in this semester, I dramaturged a musical, which was great. So to be very honest, both of these productions were interesting, but it turned me off to participating in any more productions like this because I saw the other experiences that my colleagues were having. And at least for each of them, I think this year in particular, we're able to get a very intimate experience with dramaturgy and theater as it plays out in real life. I have yet to have that intimate experience, and it's for 2 reasons. One, because I feel as though the directors I worked with weren't necessarily... I don't know, I want to say they weren't necessarily open, but I don't think they were necessarily prepared to work with a dramaturg. And I don't think they were really open to development. You know what I'm saying? And just getting inside of a piece of work. Whereas my colleagues, one was working on an amazing devised piece. One was working on very closely with another piece with our new professor. So I think he actually welcomed the assistants. And then another one of my colleagues is working with our other grad cohort colleague and as a dramaturg on their piece coming this spring, and that they already have a great relationship. And so that experience was very intimate in terms of developing the piece and giving feedback on a piece and being involved in a piece. And I have consistently felt very external to my particular experiences. And I think part of it is the relationship. I wasn't able to develop that relationship with my directors. And I think another part of it, though, is that I just don't have as much time and opportunity to spend every single moment in rehearsal because I am a single mom and I can't, rehearsal is usually from 6 to 10 every single night. And at maximum, I can only make it usually 2 to 3 times a week. Usually twice a week, and the third time a week every other week. So I think those two, and I'm not blaming anybody in particular, I just don't think my particular circumstances are conducive to having the kind of intimate dramaturgical experience that I would really like. Because I have that personal barrier in my life. I happened to get paired up with directors who weren't really sure what to do with me just as a dramaturg in general. And then on top of both of those things, my time is much more limited. I have these classes, I have a business, I have things. So I'm not blaming the program or anybody else for that, but I am glad that my basic requirements for that part of my degree are over so that I can just get my degree, graduate, and then if I want to be a dramaturg in a more intimate way, I can just apply to be a dramaturg at an actual theater and have it be my full-time employment. By that point, I'll be back home with my family. Somebody will be available to watch my daughter. I'll be making a decent income and I'll be able to work on a piece 24/7 as opposed to having to squeeze in, an hour here, an hour there in between all my other responsibilities. So that's just my evaluation of those 2-stage productions that I dramaturged. They were still good experiences in terms of getting me the basic experience that I need and the basic portfolio that I need. I have now 2 websites that I've created for these productions, 2 program notes, 2 pre-show presentations, 2 post-show presentations, and then, lobby displays, which essentially is a combination of all those things. So, I got the basics of what I needed, and I hope in the future I will have more fruitful dramaturgical relationships with people on a production. But that might just be something I have to wait for when I have a little bit more personal support to the other areas of my life and after I feel more confident in my theater skills. So that's my evaluation for that. I also started studying Russian this year, which I unfortunately had to drop, but I still have all the online information, the access to the course and the books and the dictionary and the Russian keyboard. So that's definitely something that I do want to study on a casual basis over the course of the next, year to few years and just have a working knowledge of Russian because I've been wanting to add Russian to my language repertoire for a very long time. And I wanted to do that here, but unfortunately, I just don't have as much time, as I did in my last graduate program to do those extra things. But I planted the seeds. I set the foundation. I can communicate at least on a basic level in Russian, and I can at least read phonetically and alphabetically Russian, even though I don't know all of the words. So, still some props to be given and to be taken in that area. And then finally, my TA-ship this year was a major learning experience. I mean, major. Because, for one, my particular TA-ship has quite a lot of work and grading to it. Even more so than that of my other counterparts. I mean, and I usually don't compare and contrast because I usually don't care what everybody else is doing. In my opinion, I can have the most work in the world in my grad program and still kill it. and not just within the program but outside of it, because that is what I do. Like I work really hard, and I take pride in my work, and I enjoy learning, and I enjoy working. However, this year has been a massive major lesson in self-care and in putting up boundaries, especially when it comes to my TA-ship. So in the particular course that I TA, and my professor is great, my supervisor is great, but in this particular course, the class size is nearly 200 students. And for whatever reason, this did not cue my professor or my supervisor to then reorganize like the level or intensity of the course. And it just creates a lot of stress, a lot of grading, which is, in my opinion, superfluous, and a lot of just inner turmoil. Because over the course of the semester, we have like, I would say maybe a total of 15 assignments, right? And that's not bad. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not so bad. But within those assignments, 5 of those are pop quizzes, which are given at any point in time. And I'm not talking about one question pop quizzes. I'm talking about pop quizzes that are sometimes short answer, pop quizzes that are sometimes, 2 or 3 like one-liners, which work great. But then you have some pop quizzes that are like, 1 to 2, like write a paragraph or whatever. And like, this is not me trying to complain, but I'm just giving you an idea of what's going on. So we have those pop quizzes. Those are actually like the lightest part. And then we have literally a series of, let's see, they have a total of like 8 written assignments, each of which is at least 4 pages, right? Now, if you like do the math, right, you have the pop quizzes. Let's say 200 pop quizzes. I'm going to be actually very conservative here and do some math for you. I'm going to say 185, consistently handed in assignments times 5 pop quizzes, right? Okay, 925 assignments to grade over the course of the semester. But then you have 8 written assignments that are at least 4 pages. So that's 32 pages, like minimum, per student a semester. That's minimum. A lot of them write more than that. Times 185. Now we're getting into the 6,000 page count, right? And so this doesn't seem like it's a huge deal, but when you literally have 3,000, like you have assignment after assignment, like handed in every Tuesday and Thursday. And you also have, your full graduate school schedule, plus the show you have to dramaturg, plus everything else that's going on. I'm a single mom, and I also am trying to like build my business on the side, which again, I do prioritize my graduate school work. But the TA grading was literally out of control. Like, people saw me all throughout the entire semester carrying stacks, literally this big, like to and from like the 2 buildings that our departments share. And it was obvious that my grading pile was far more intense and more significant than pretty much all of my other colleagues, seemingly combined. And so, luckily I did have some help this year, but I would give her about a third of what the grading was. Occasionally, I think towards the end, I had to give her almost half. Like, I'm talking about like the very end, about half, because I was just so swamped. I just couldn't. But, again, it's important to work hard, and it's important to earn what you get. At the same time, the grading felt super overkill. And I personally believe that if you're getting more and more students enrolled in your class every semester, you need to adjust the assignments accordingly so that you're not being cray-cray. And it's good to train your students to be on point and on top of their game. And I'm not saying to lessen their education, but I'm just saying that it's important to be reasonable. So at some point, when I was like literally drowning in paperwork, and mind you, not only did we have to grade all of those thousands of pages, but we also had to make sure that they were alphabetized and collated every single time, which took, that's a brainless activity. It's a mindless job, but it still took 2 hours to do so because there were just so many pages and students to keep track of. And then, of course, you have the stragglers who are consistently handing in work late. So, and then the worst part of that, honestly, was the fact that some students, seeing that there were so many assignments and seeing that, there was so many things to keep track of, would try to take advantage of the fact that they believed that, maybe they're a little disorganized over there, so I can pretend that I handed in an assignment when I really didn't. So we had a few of those throughout the semester, which was very disheartening. And this had nothing to do with the workload itself, but, when you have so many papers to grade and then you have some students trying to take advantage of all of those, of all of that process of, the fact that it can be overwhelming and that they know that, you might doubt yourself if they tell you that you misplaced their paper. Some people do try to take advantage of that. And we have put systems in place to make sure that we are on point. I've never lost a paper in my entire life, just period. I just haven't. But we do put processes in place to hold the students accountable and make sure they're telling us the truth, but it's still another energy drain. And so this year, I really had to, towards the end of my semester, remind myself that I am here to get an MFA degree. I am not here to be slave labor for this TA class. That, as a part of our package for getting free tuition at the school, we're supposed to, in turn, give 20 to 30 hours a week in TA service. And I have no problem doing that. But when it started exceeding that limit, and when I started to be more focused on getting my TA grading and my papers in on time, as opposed to focusing on what I'm learning in class, that's when it becomes a problem. And so for me, I had to really draw some strong boundaries, and I had to remind myself that in my last program, which was at the UW Madison, and it's a PhD in sociology, they tell you explicitly, do your work, your TA work, and do it well. But please remember, you're not here to be a TA. You're here to finish your coursework and to write your dissertation and to get a PhD. And that should be 80% of your focus. And I felt as though I was not able to really make my education my 80% focus this year, because I would say 60% of my focus was on my TA-ship. And to me personally, I would even up that to like 65-70%, because I was constantly stressed out about TAing and about grading. And my supervisor did really help to keep the balance by allowing me to stay out of the actual class itself to give me more time to grade. But it took up way more time than is appropriate, in my opinion, for someone trying to get a graduate degree. I'm not here to get a graduate degree in grading papers. I'm here to get a graduate degree in theater arts and generative dramaturgy. And so, again, this is not me being snide or snippy or judgmental or, ungrateful. It's not any of that. It's about being balanced and reminding myself where my focus should be. And so I really had to put boundaries. And as a part of putting up those boundaries, and also just because I wanted to expand my horizons, I applied for a different TA-ship next semester, which is way more up my alley, and I'm super excited about it. And it's this course called The Haunted Screen. Yeah, The Haunted Screen. And it's all about horror films. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is the perfect TA-ship. I am so excited. And so, so I'm going to be co-TAing that with another TA next semester. But I was also double assigned between that class and another class that my supervisor is teaching next semester called Theater Appreciation. So I still will be grading for theater, just for a different theater course, but mostly my focus is going to be on that Haunted Screen course, because that is deliberately totally up my alley and what I want to do, and it's also in the film department. So basically I had to kind of, I wouldn't say put my foot down, but I had to make some decisions. Interesting, though, that I'm really the only TA that seems consistently double assigned to multiple TA classes every single year. I'm like, okay, y'all can do that, but where's my double cash, Anyway, I'm not going to get into that on this podcast, but that's a major lesson I learned from my TA-ship. Another major lesson that I learned is that I need to, and I have, asserted my voice and my power as one of the developers of a program in process. My colleagues and I, most of whom who have left the program, really did a lot of pushing on the administration to edit and update the program as was needed for the needs of the cohort. And even though, unfortunately, my colleagues are not here to benefit from all of their hard work, they essentially helped to really push some significant change in the program. We pushed it, we spearheaded it on our own, even with pushback from other cohort members, which was unfortunate and stupid, actually. But I think people were just sort of working from a place of, I don't feel empowered to speak and I don't know what to say, and thus couldn't provide the kind of support that was necessary for us to push these things through. But we pushed the department to create evaluations of the program. We pushed the department to put more art aspects into the program and not just have it to be skewed towards scholarship. We pushed all that, me and my two friends. And so I'm super proud of the work that we did, and I'm super proud of the fact that we were able to shape the program. And that was a major lesson in how to participate in the more bureaucratic, political, and hierarchical aspects of an institution. And that entire year, actually, I was in a lot of, as many committee meetings as I possibly could have attended. I was in those meetings, helping to, vet and evaluate new people, new applicants that were trying to come to the program, new professors who were trying to enter the program, asking important questions, usually only ever being the only person bringing up diversity issues and trying to see if these individuals are at least willing to understand issues in diversity in theater, or if they're familiar with diversity in theater, because that's important to me. And our cohort, at least it is extremely diverse. Right now, all of us are women or identifying as queer or transgender. Half of us are women of color. Like, you need to be aware of and familiar with issues in diversity, especially because theater is male dominated. So even if you don't have any idea how to deal with people of color, you need to know how to deal with and empower women in theater because it's a male dominated industry. So I was there helping to shape the program on that level, and I was super proud of that growth and development. I also just grew in general as a theater artist, and I've been talking about this in many of my videos, so I won't go too deep, but and I talked about this with you guys earlier in this video, but I noticed that I started to think of myself more as a theater artist, or as a growing theater artist, creating stage play concepts, musical concepts, and adding those to my project slate for Rebel Ragdoll. And also I really started to dig into what makes a Black theater tradition, trying to explore that and to understand that and to conceptualize that. And that's been a major point of growth for me. On top of that, me developing or just coming up with all these new sorts of stage play ideas and musical ideas only further influenced my dedication to doll theater, which is another subsidiary of Rebel Ragdoll. And to be honest, it's still in shadow development right now, what I call shadow development. But I wasn't even sure if doll theater should be one of our subsidiaries to begin with, because I wasn't really sure how much I cared about theater or how much I wanted to deal with theater. But as I spend more time in this program and more time in the industry, so to speak, quote unquote, I realized that we need more Black theater artists, at least to do things independently. Maybe I won't be ever known on the larger American theater scene, but I definitely want to provide a space for voices of color and Black voices in theater and on the stage. And I definitely want to in certain ways help to usher new voices and playwrights of color onto some stage. I don't know which stage, if it's going to be the main theater stage or if it's going to be, maybe some small indie theater spaces. But I want to be someone who helps to dramaturg and bring in those new voices. So this entire year has helped me to really understand myself and who I want to be as a theater artist and how I would like to impact the world as a theater artist. And to end this section, the major decision that I made this year, the major growth in addition to everything else, was that I finally introduced, not in the way that I wanted to, but I still introduced to my committee, basically all the faculty members who run this program, I introduced them to Rebel Ragdoll. What it is, what my mission is, why I established it, how it operates as a growing media fempire, the fact that Rebel Ragdoll is the postgraduate plan. I have no interest in really working for other people when I graduate this program. I only will do so if I have to pay bills, and even then, that will be a temporary situation until Rebel Ragdoll is self-sustaining. And it was great. It was liberating to let people know who I am, why I am the way I am, and what my plans are, so that when they're in their committee meetings making plans and evaluating me, they have another kind of context to use. I think I sort of have the reputation in my program, for better or for worse, of being someone who kind of follows the beat of her own drum. And now they understand why. I had Rebel Ragdoll going before I got here. This program is specifically for me being used to develop myself as an artist, as a professional, as an entrepreneur, and to give me that theater training that I feel as though I was lacking when I got here. Because for Rebel Ragdoll, I felt pretty confident in the publishing aspect, in the film production aspect, and even to a certain extent in the game design aspect, but I knew nothing about theater. And I told them when I came here that I wanted to learn more to basically fill in those gaps of my learning. But I either they forgot, or they weren't paying attention, or Rebel Ragdoll was not communicated to the rest of the committee. So now Rebel Ragdoll has been introduced, and it will keep being reintroduced every single semester. And that's a scary thing, because when you look around the table, some people think it's great. Other people think that what you're doing is crazy, or what you're doing is never going to work. And I'm basically presenting Rebel Ragdoll to people for academic scrutiny, which I don't like. But the bottom line is to still tell people who you are, no matter how much they scrutinize you. So with that, I was able to clarify Rebel Ragdoll, my vision, my goals as a theater maker and a dramaturg. And then after I was done doing that, I gave myself permission to recuse myself, or to step back from creating my art within an academic context. So I have officially sort of pulled out my investments in academic art, because I don't like having to put my artistic ideas in front of a committee of people before I launch into making my art. I don't like seeking permission. I don't like seeking critique before a piece is even conceptualized or developed. It just kills the art making process for me. And so, being that I still have to make certain art projects within the academic setting, there are certain things that I have to do, but the real passion projects, the Rebel Ragdoll projects, my personal projects, none of those will ever be put into the academic institution ever again. I just don't like it. I don't like how scholarship and academia runs up against art, and sometimes occasionally runs over it. And so for my personal projects, though, if there's an academic component or a scholarly component to it that I need to be critiqued on, then I will present that to my colleagues and to my faculty. But aside from that, I am limiting my artistic production to the spring production that we have going on this in 2018, to the fall production we have going on in 2018, and then to my final MFA thesis project. as well as the master's report / comp that we have to do in between then. So 4 more projects I have to put before a committee, and then I'm done. But anything personal, anything, deep and impactful that has to do with me and my vision is coming nowhere near academia, because academics, and bless their hearts, but they don't really know what to do with unbridled creativity that doesn't seek permission or seek validation from its predecessors. I know what to do with that, but they are still struggling with how to deal with that. So having said that, it's been a very, very productive and impactful year of growth. Whereas I hated the grad program last year, I'm not going to lie, I really actually enjoyed it more this semester in particular. And I foresee myself enjoying it even more as the semesters progress and as our theoretical and historical classes lessen. Like after this spring 2018 semester is over, I pretty much expect that I will continue to enjoy graduate school much more because it'll be more on my terms. So that is my update. These are getting so long, and I don't know what I'm going to do with this 5 to 6 hour podcast, but whatever, just roll with it. I'll put in time codes for you guys. So if you want to listen to a particular section, you can just go to that point in the podcast. I will see you guys in the next section. Thanks for hanging with me and for dealing with my updates. All right. Bye.